The silence after the slam of the door was the loudest thing I'd ever heard, a ringing echo in a home that suddenly felt as vast and empty as space itself. Outside, the party had already started, music thumping with a cheerful beat that felt like a personal taunt. They were all in there, celebrating 30 years of marriage, 30 years of a family built on a foundation I thought was unbreakable. But I was here, alone, forbidden, and the weight of it all settled on me like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. If your own mother or father ever made you feel unwanted, subscribe now. It hadn't always been like this. I remember a childhood filled with laughter, Sunday dinners around a crowded table, and the unwavering belief that family meant everything. My parents, Sarah and David, painted a picture of perfect unity, a love story that inspired me. My sister, Emily, and I were their pride and joy, or so I thought. Amanda was always trying to be a good daughter, working hard to make my parents proud. As we grew older, Emily always seemed to be the favorite. She excelled at everything she did, the golden child who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was always trying to catch up, forever in her shadow. When my parents announced their 30th wedding anniversary, I was thrilled. I immediately started planning what I would wear, what gift I would give, envisioning a night filled with joy and celebration of the people I loved most in the world. The invitation arrived a month later, a beautiful embossed card that I placed on my mantelpiece, a constant reminder of the happy occasion to come. But then, a week before the party, my mother called. Her voice was strained, apologetic. "They were so sorry, darling, but due to unforeseen circumstances and limited seating, I wouldn't be able to attend the party." My heart plummeted. Limited seating? It was a rented ballroom, big enough to house a small country. I pressed, wanting to understand, but my mother became evasive, reciting a script of flimsy excuses that did little to mask the truth. I wasn't wanted there. The excuses piled on, each more insulting than the last, each one cutting deeper into my soul. It was a small gathering, she said. It was mostly for close friends and family, she said. They didn't want to overwhelm me, she said. Each word was a carefully placed dagger, twisting in the wound of their rejection. I tried to remain calm, to reason with her, but her decision was final. It was made. As I hung up the phone, a wave of nausea washed over me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly alone. The days leading up to the party were agonizing. I saw Emily flitting about, excitedly preparing for the event, her face glowing with anticipation. She spoke of the dress she would wear, the speeches she would give, the dances she would share with our parents. Each detail she recounted was a sharp reminder of my exclusion, a painful contrast to my own isolation. On the night of the party, I stayed in my apartment, the silence amplifying the music drifting from a distance. I tried to distract myself, reading a book, watching television, but my mind kept wandering back to the ballroom, to the laughter and celebration I was barred from. Hours later, scrolling through social media, I saw a picture my sister had posted. It was a group shot of my family, beaming, seemingly without a care in the world. And that's when I noticed something else, something far more sinister, hidden beneath the smiles. The person I trusted most was one of them. The pictures swam before my eyes, the smiling faces morphing into grotesque masks of betrayal. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the lie. My father stood with his arm around Emily, both of them subtly angled away from my mother, Sarah. Emily's hand rested possessively on my father's arm. A diamond bracelet sparkled on her wrist, identical to the one my mother had always worn, the one my father had given her on their 10th anniversary. My mother's face, though smiling, held a forced quality, a hollowness that mirrored the emptiness I felt inside. My vision blurred. The glass in my hand shattered, the shards of glass cutting into my palm, a physical manifestation of the pain that ripped through me. I spent the rest of the night piecing together fragments of memories, replaying conversations, searching for clues I had missed, moments where the truth had been hidden in plain sight. Sleeplessness became my new normal. Each night I would toss and turn, haunted by the image of that photograph, the realization that my family was not what I thought it was. The foundation of my life had crumbled, and I was left adrift in a sea of uncertainty and pain. I tried talking to my mother, calling her under the guise of checking in, but her voice remained distant, her answers vague and evasive. When I broached the subject of the party, she quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation towards safer topics, the weather, her garden, anything to avoid the truth. My father was even more elusive, his phone calls becoming less frequent, his excuses more transparent. He was always in a meeting or traveling for work, his voice strained and hurried, as if he couldn't wait to get off the phone. I even tried to talk to Emily, hoping that she could shed some light on the situation, that she could offer some explanation for their behavior. But she met my questions with a wall of defensiveness, accusing me of being paranoid, of imagining things. "It's just a party, Amanda," she said, her voice dismissive. "Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" Her words stung, confirming my worst fears. She was complicit, a willing participant in my exclusion. The rejection was unbearable, a constant ache in my chest. I felt like an outsider looking in, watching my family from a distance, unable to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of their betrayal grew heavier with each passing moment. I lost my appetite, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. I struggled to concentrate at work, my mind consumed by thoughts of my family, of their lies and deceit. My colleagues noticed my distress, offering words of concern and support, but I couldn't bring myself to confide in them. The shame was too great, the humiliation too profound. How could I explain my own parents didn't want me, that my own sister had turned against me? The silence at home was deafening. I found myself avoiding social gatherings, isolating myself from friends and acquaintances. The fear of running into my family, of being forced to feign normalcy, was overwhelming. I started seeing a therapist, hoping to find some solace, some way to cope with the pain. She listened patiently as I recounted my story, offering insights and guidance, but nothing seemed to ease the ache in my heart. "You need to confront them, Amanda," she said gently. "You need to ask them why they did this to you." But the thought of confronting my parents filled me with dread. I knew that they would deny everything, that they would try to manipulate me, to gaslight me into believing that I was overreacting. And yet, I knew that I couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a cycle of pain and despair. I needed answers. I needed closure. I needed to reclaim my life. I began to formulate a plan, a way to uncover the truth and expose their lies. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to fight back, to reclaim my dignity, and to hold them accountable for their actions. The first step was gathering information, collecting evidence that would prove their deception. I started by meticulously reviewing old family photos, searching for inconsistencies, for subtle clues that might reveal the truth. I scoured social media, tracking my sister's posts, analyzing her interactions with my parents, looking for patterns of behavior that would confirm my suspicions. It was a slow and painstaking process, but with each new discovery, my resolve grew stronger. I was no longer the naive, trusting daughter who had blindly accepted her family's lies. I was a woman on a mission, driven by a burning desire for justice, ready to confront the darkness that had consumed my life. The digital breadcrumbs led me to old emails, carelessly forwarded messages between Emily and my father, their words laced with a sickening intimacy, a casual cruelty directed at my mother and at me. They spoke of getting rid of me, of ensuring I wouldn't complicate things. Complicate what? The air in my apartment grew sick, suffocating. I felt like I was drowning, the walls closing in, the weight of their betrayal crushing me. I stumbled to the bathroom, the crimson from the cuts on my hand staining the white porcelain sink. I stared at my reflection, a stranger staring back, eyes hollow, face gaunt, the ghost of the girl I once was. Was this my life now? A pariah, rejected and reviled by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? The thought was unbearable. A wave of despair washed over me, so intense, so profound, that I felt myself teetering on the edge of oblivion. I reached for the bottle of sleeping pills in the medicine cabinet, my hand trembling. It would be so easy, a way out of the pain, a release from the torment. Just a few pills, and it would all be over. The darkness beckoned, promising solace, promising peace. I opened the bottle, the pills spilling into my palm, a handful of oblivion. I closed my eyes, ready to surrender, ready to let go. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a spark of anger, a refusal to be defeated. They wanted me gone. They wanted to erase me from their lives, but I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I wouldn't let them win. With a surge of adrenaline, I threw the pills back into the bottle, slamming it shut. I wouldn't let their darkness consume me. I wouldn't let their lies define me. I would fight back. I would expose them. I would make them pay. The tears streamed down my face, a mixture of grief and rage. But beneath the tears, a new resolve was hardening. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of their downfall. I would use their lies against them, their secrets against them, their own twisted game against them. I would gather every piece of evidence, every shred of truth, and I would unleash it upon them with the force of a hurricane. The game had changed. The hunted had become the hunter. I spent the next few days meticulously organizing my evidence, creating a digital dossier of their deceit. The emails, the photographs, the social media posts, the financial records, every piece of the puzzle carefully assembled, each detail a weapon in my arsenal. I researched legal strategies, consulting with lawyers, exploring my options. I learned about defamation, about breach of contract, about the legal ramifications of their actions. I wanted to be prepared, to anticipate their every move, to ensure that my revenge was not only satisfying, but also legally sound. I started documenting everything, recording conversations, saving voicemails, creating a timeline of events. I knew that they would try to deny everything, to discredit me, to paint me as delusional or unstable. But I would be ready. I would have irrefutable proof of their guilt, evidence that would stand up in court, evidence that would expose them for the liars and manipulators they truly were. Sleep became a luxury, replaced by hours of meticulous planning and preparation. I was fueled by adrenaline and a burning desire for justice, my mind razor-sharp, my focus unwavering. I started to transform, shedding the skin of the wounded daughter and emerging as a cold, calculating strategist. I learned to control my emotions, to mask my pain, to project an image of strength and confidence. I knew that they were watching me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to give up. But I wouldn't. I would use their scrutiny to my advantage, lulling them into a false sense of security, making them believe that they had won. And then, when they least expected it, I would strike. I began to cultivate new alliances, reaching out to people who had been hurt by my family in the past, people who had witnessed their lies and deceit firsthand. I discovered a network of individuals who shared my desire for justice, people who were willing to help me expose the truth. Together, we pieced together a more complete picture of my family's dark secrets, uncovering hidden debts, illicit affairs, and a pattern of manipulation and abuse that stretched back for decades. The more I learned, the more determined I became to bring them down. They had built their lives on lies and deceit, and I would be the one to tear it all apart. I practiced my delivery, rehearsing the words I would say, the questions I would ask, the accusations I would level. I imagined their faces as I revealed their secrets, the shock, the fear, the desperation. It was a dark fantasy, but it fueled my resolve, giving me the strength to continue. I knew that my revenge would come at a cost. I would likely lose my family, my friends, my reputation. But it was a price I was willing to pay. I had nothing left to lose. They had taken everything from me, and now it was my turn to take everything from them. The day they tried to end me was the day revenge was born. I smiled. I played their game, but I was recording everything. The next family gathering was a minefield, a carefully orchestrated performance where I played the role of the dutiful daughter, the loving sister. Inside, I was a coiled spring, every nerve ending screaming for release, every muscle tensed, ready to strike. But I knew that patience was my greatest weapon. I needed to gather more evidence, to solidify my plan, to ensure that my revenge was swift and decisive. I brought a small, unassuming digital recorder to the gathering, concealing it in my purse, its microphone pointed towards the conversations I knew would be incriminating. My father, ever the charmer, greeted me with a hug, his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. Emily, feigning concern, asked about my health,
her voice dripping with insincerity. My mother, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness, steered me towards the buffet table, as if food could somehow compensate for the gaping wound in our relationship.
I played along, laughing at their jokes, nodding at their stories, all the while surreptitiously recording their every word. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, I found myself alone with my father in the study. He poured us both a glass of wine, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to gauge my intentions. "Amanda," he said, his voice low and serious, "I know things haven't been easy lately." I cut him off, feigning ignorance. "What do you mean, Dad? Everything's fine." He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, as if afraid of being overheard. "I just want you to know that we love you, Amanda. We always have." The words felt hollow, meaningless, after everything they had done. I forced a smile, my hand tightening around my wine glass. "I love you too, Dad." As I spoke, I subtly activated the miniature camera concealed in my glasses, capturing his every expression, his every gesture. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I spent countless hours poring over the recordings I had gathered, transcribing every conversation, analyzing every detail. I consulted with a forensic audio expert, enhancing the recordings, isolating key phrases, eliminating background noise. I learned how to detect subtle inflections in their voices, the telltale signs of deception. I discovered that my father had been secretly transferring large sums of money into Emily's account, using shell corporations to conceal the transactions. I uncovered emails between Emily and a private investigator, detailing their efforts to discredit me, to paint me as mentally unstable. The evidence was mounting, the noose tightening around their necks. One afternoon, while visiting my mother, I managed to borrow her laptop while she was distracted in the garden. Under the guise of needing to check my email, I quickly installed a keystroke logger, a small piece of software that would record every keystroke, every password, every message she typed. I knew it was a risky move, but I was desperate for more information. Within days, the keystroke logger had provided me with a treasure trove of data. I discovered that my mother had been secretly communicating with my father's mistress, offering her hush money to keep the affair quiet. I found emails detailing their plans to sell the family business and move to another country, leaving me behind to fend for myself. The betrayal was staggering, the depth of their deceit seemingly endless. I knew I was getting close, that my revenge was within reach. But I also knew that I needed to be careful, that one wrong move could jeopardize everything. They were growing increasingly suspicious, their phone calls becoming more frequent, their visits more intrusive. They were watching me, waiting for me to slip up, waiting for me to reveal my hand. I decided to throw them off the scent, to play the role of the naive, unsuspecting daughter, the victim of their manipulation. I started confiding in my mother, sharing my fears and insecurities, seeking her advice and guidance. I showered Emily with compliments, praising her accomplishments, admiring her beauty. I even started spending more time with my father, accompanying him to golf outings, attending business lunches, feigning interest in his work. It was a masterful performance, a carefully crafted illusion that lulled them into a false sense of security. They started to relax, to let their guard down, believing that they had successfully manipulated me, that they had regained control of the situation. Little did they know, I was simply biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I discovered a hidden compartment in my father's desk. Inside, I found a stack of documents detailing a series of illegal business transactions, a web of fraud and corruption that could land him in prison for years. I also found a signed confession admitting to his affair with Emily and outlining their plan to defraud my mother of her share of the family fortune. It was the smoking gun, the irrefutable proof of their guilt. I knew that the time had come to unleash my revenge. I spent the next few days preparing for the final showdown. I contacted a lawyer, outlining my case, providing him with all of the evidence I had gathered. I hired a public relations firm to manage the media fallout, ensuring that my story would be heard. I even reached out to a documentary filmmaker, offering him exclusive access to my story, knowing that the exposure would amplify my message and hold my family accountable for their actions. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a mixture of excitement and dread, of triumph and fear.
I knew that my revenge would have far-reaching consequences, that it would shatter my family's carefully constructed facade and expose their dark secrets to the world. But I also knew that it was the right thing to do, that I owed it to myself and to everyone else who had been hurt by their lies and deceit. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. I knew their biggest weakness, their arrogance. They believed they were smarter, more powerful, untouchable. They underestimated me. That was their fatal error. It was time to spring the trap. I orchestrated a family dinner at their favorite restaurant, the place where they always celebrated their successes, a monument to their hollow victories. I made sure to invite not only my parents and Emily, but also key members of their social circle, business partners, longtime friends, the people whose respect they craved. I wanted an audience. I needed maximum impact. I knew they wouldn't suspect a thing. They would see it as a reconciliation, a sign that I was finally coming to my senses, falling back in line. They were wrong. Terribly wrong.
I arrived early, ensuring that the restaurant staff was aware of my presence and my instructions. I had arranged for a projector and screen to be set up in a private room, ostensibly or a family slideshow, a nostalgic trip down memory lane. The staff, informed of the true nature of the evening, were discreetly on my side. As my family arrived, I greeted them with a warm embrace, a practiced smile masking the storm raging within. Emily, ever the opportunist, gushed about how wonderful it was that we were all together again. My father, his eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction, clapped me on the back, congratulating me on my maturity. My mother, her face etched with a mixture of relief and apprehension, simply squeezed my hand, her silence speaking volumes. As everyone settled in, I dimmed the lights, casting the room into a hushed anticipation. I clicked the remote and the projector flickered to life, illuminating the screen with an image of my family, a seemingly innocent picture from years ago. The mood was light, filled with forced laughter and strained conversation. They were all so eager to believe the charade, so desperate to maintain the illusion of normalcy. I let them bask in their delusion for a few minutes, savoring their ignorance, knowing that their world was about to come crashing down around them. Then I clicked the remote again. The image on the screen changed. This time it was an email, a damning message between Emily and my father, outlining their plans to get rid of me. A gasp rippled through the room. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief. Emily's face paled. My father's jaw tightened. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. I ignored him, clicking the remote again. Another image flashed on the screen, a photograph of my father with his mistress, caught in a compromising position. A collective murmur filled the room. The air crackled with tension. My father lunged towards the projector, attempting to shut it off, but I was faster. I grabbed his arm, stopping him in his tracks. "There's more," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Much more." I continued to click through the images, each one more damning than the last. Financial records detailing their fraudulent activities, emails exposing their lies and manipulations, photographs documenting their betrayal. The room fell silent, the only sound the rhythmic clicking of the remote and the gasps of the onlookers. My family stood frozen, their faces masks of shock and horror. Their carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the ugliness beneath. Finally, I displayed the signed confession I had found in my father's desk, the document outlining his affair with Emily and their scheme to defraud my mother. The silence in the room was deafening. My mother stared at my father, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and fury. Emily stood motionless, her face ashen. My father, his composure shattered, sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "How could you?" my mother whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could you do this to us?" My father didn't answer. He couldn't. He had no defense. The truth was out. As the weight of their actions bore down on them, I turned to the assembled guests, my voice ringing with a newfound strength. "You all thought you knew this family," I said, "but you didn't. You only saw the carefully crafted image they wanted you to see. Now, you know the truth." I paused, letting my words sink in. They are not the people you thought they were. They are liars, manipulators, and cheaters, and they will pay for what they have done. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. But outside, waiting for me, were police officers. I had sent them an anonymous tip, a tip about the illegal activities detailed in the very confession I had just revealed. As they entered the restaurant, my father looked up, his eyes filled with a dawning horror. The exact day they tried to end me was about to become the day they lost everything. The exact day they tried to end me was about to become the day they lost everything. The scene inside the restaurant was chaos. My mother, finally understanding the depth of my father's betrayal, slapped him across the face, the sound echoing through the stunned silence. Emily, realizing her gilded cage was about to shatter, began to sob uncontrollably. The police, having been given the go-ahead by the anonymous tip, me, moved in with practiced efficiency. They read my father his rights, the words hanging heavy in the air. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. It was a look I would savor for years to come. The fallout was immediate and devastating. The news of my father's arrest and the family scandals spread like wildfire, fueled by the documentary filmmaker I had hired and the public relations firm I had engaged. The family business, once a symbol of their success, was now tainted, its reputation irreparably damaged. Their social circle, once so eager to bask in their glory, quickly distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the disgrace. Emily, stripped of her financial security and social standing, was left to face the consequences of her actions alone. My mother, though heartbroken, began the long and difficult process of rebuilding her life, free from the lies and manipulation that had defined her marriage. As for me, I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. I had achieved my revenge. They had lost everything. In the weeks that followed, the truth continued to spill out. The illegal business transactions were exposed, leading to multiple investigations and indictments. The affair between my father and Emily became a national scandal, fodder for tabloids and late-night talk shows. The documentary I had commissioned aired, exposing the family's dark secrets to the world. It was a brutal and unflinching portrayal of their lies, their deceit, and their cruelty. The public outcry was deafening. My family was vilified, their names synonymous with greed, betrayal, and corruption. Their carefully constructed facade was shattered, revealing the ugliness that had always lurked beneath. My father, facing the prospect of years in prison, tried to reach out to me, begging for forgiveness, promising to make amends. But I refused to speak to him. His words were meaningless, his apologies hollow. He had had his chance. He had made his choices, and now he had to face the consequences. Emily, desperate and alone, attempted to reach out as well, seeking my pity, claiming that she was a victim of my father's manipulation. But I saw through her lies. She was just as culpable as he was. She had willingly participated in their schemes, driven by her own greed and ambition. I had no sympathy for her. The act she participated in was a darkness I wouldn't wish on anyone. My mother, however, was a different story. While I couldn't forgive her for her complicity in my father's actions, I understood her pain and her vulnerability. She had been manipulated and controlled for years, her spirit slowly eroded by his lies and his deceit. I reached out to her, offering her my support and my forgiveness. It was a difficult and emotional conversation, filled with tears and recriminations. But in the end, we found a way to connect, to heal, to move forward. We began to rebuild our relationship, slowly and cautiously, forging a new bond based on honesty and respect. It was a long and arduous process, but it was worth it. I had finally broken free from the cycle of abuse and manipulation that had defined my family for so long. I had reclaimed my life. They lost everything. I just smiled. I watched their world burn. It was a slow burn, but a burn nonetheless. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's about reclaiming your power, your dignity, your life. It's about holding people accountable for their actions, about ensuring that they can never hurt you or anyone else again. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.